America with Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. And now, Archbishop Sheen.
Fellow Americans, long time no Sheen. And here I am back again with an angel, with a blackboard, without the robes. I'm not going to ask you if you missed them, but I'm going to tell you a story about them. Some years ago, I went to Cleveland to give a lecture. And I went into the dining room because I had nothing to eat. I went in with 4 men. And I ordered some graham crackers and a little milk. There was a waitress in the early flirties taking the orders. She took the orders of the 4 men, and then she looked at me all dressed in my robes. And she says, "Well, Cock Robin, what will you have?" Are you worried about America? I am. And that is what made me come back to television. I'm very much concerned about our country. I could find no reason to come back until it was proposed that I ask, where is America going? There are 143 countries in the world. And there isn't any one of them you would rather live in than this. Why then can we not love this country? What are the reasons for the decline of patriotism? I think there are 2. And the first reason is we live in an age of anti-heroes. Today, the spirit of America is, I've got to be me. And so when anyone else is above us, with the spirit of sacrifice and dedication, we try to drag him down to our level. He's a reproach to us, a patriot and a hero. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why the lives that are written of our great patriots today are almost like gossips. Look at the recent life of Washington. It shows how much money he spent. Jefferson concentrates on the fact that he consorted with a black woman. Abraham Lincoln is called a racist. Imagine. And now the attacks even on Kennedy. As soon as we find a great man, we ask, I wonder why he acts that way. We impugn his motives. So it's difficult to have a hero and a patriot. And another reason is we've been humiliated. We take it out on our country. We have been brought up on the great American dream. We have more television sets, more electric shavers, more radios, more automobiles, more gadgets than any other country of the world. We're the richest. We believed in an indefinite progress. We were getting better and better and better. Nothing could stop us. And then the Arabs shut off oil. Then we began to find dishonesty in high places and low places. And we took it out on our country. We began to demean it. And the result is there's been a great decline in patriotism. Let me give you some figures. About 4 years ago, there were statistics gathered about the patriotism of college and non-college students. Now, here was the patriotism of non-college students 4 years ago. They were asked, do you believe that patriotism is an important virtue? 4 years ago, 60% of the non-college students answered yes. Today, 40% valued patriotism. Now take the college students. 4 years ago, only 35% of the college students believed that patriotism had a value. Today, 19%. Imagine. And they're receiving government aid. Some of their laboratories have been equipped by the university. But only 19% believe in a dedicated love of country. What is it that makes a patriot? Well, I will tell you one thing that doesn't make a patriot. When you have a country that is concerned only with, there was a little signal that you never know. I have little signals for angels, and my angel is a nice little angel. He's finished the molting of his wings and so forth. And I have little cues that you could never guess. And that last cue was missed, but it's all right. He was to clean my blackboard, and now I continue with the problem. What is it that makes patriotism? Well, one thing is certain. You will never have patriotism as long as the values of people are on a horizontal line. If people believe that the only thing that matters is making money, or body sense, body pleasure, or the love of power, if you believe that, you will never have patriotism. They're living for themselves. What is required for patriotism? You have to have a value over and above the horizontal, the earthly. You have to have a realm up here where there's such a thing, for example, as a love of honor, loyalty, justice, sense of responsibility, and God the source of values. Only when men look to something transcendent do they have patriotism. And then when they go up to this higher realm to draw on the divine, then they can come down here. And they're ready to dedicate themselves, sacrifice themselves. Very much like a shoemaker. Here's a poor shoemaker, for example, down in the basement of his house. It's a hard life. The poor shoemaker is dealing with a lot of poor souls. And a lot of heels. Life is hard. So he goes up to the floor above where his wife and children are. And when he sees his wife and children and bathes in family love, then he's prepared to come down to his little shop and labor with more dedication. That is what is required for patriotism. And that is the way our great patriots have been made. Now let me just give you three instances. First of all, George Washington. In 1774, George Washington was presiding over the burgesses of Virginia. And word came to him about the invasion of civil rights in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And he said, "We have been disturbed by what has happened to our Commonwealth of Massachusetts." So he said, "In order that we may be strong enough to defend those rights, I am going to ask that on the 1st of June, there be a day of fasting, prayer, and reparation." He appealed to the divine to receive courage to defend the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And incidentally, George Washington wrote, you can look it up, wrote in his diary of June the 1st, went to church and fasted all day. That was Washington appealing to the transcendent and therefore a patriot. And do you know that that man for 7 years was unable to visit his own Mount Vernon? So dedicated to his country, he did not see his grandchildren until after the Battle of Yorktown. And then after he saw them, he had to take on the duties of being a president. Benjamin Franklin, at the convention in Philadelphia, he said, "We've been voting on this Constitution. We have as many ayes as nays. I think we're learning the weakness of human nature." So he said, "I think it is of great value now that we realize when we were at battle with Great Britain, we invoked the divine aid. Now we've almost forgotten the divine aid." And so he said, "I suggest that every day we pray to the Father of lights, and the two ministers of God be invited to offer prayer at the beginning of this convention and appeal to the transcendent, to the divine." And Lincoln has been the only president of the United States that ever gave us a philosophy of history. In one of the most beautiful documents in our American life, Abraham Lincoln said, "We must remember that nations as well as individuals are subject to God's judgment, and that only nations that invoke God are ever blessed. We have been blessed in this country as no other nation has ever been blessed. And yet we have forgotten God. And may it not be that the awful calamity of civil war, which now devastates our land, may be but a just punishment from God for our willful pride. We believe that all of our successes have been due to some virtue and power of our own. It behooves us then to humble ourselves before the divine majesty and to ask for forgiveness. This is the way patriots are made. They're made because there are values above the earthly and the human. Now, given that, our next question is, what hopes have we for America? And what fears? First of all, our hopes. No, let's take our fears first. End with hopes. First, our fears. We must remember that there is a law among all nations. It is the law that the Greeks worked out in their tragedies. See how my angel worked that time? But you never could know the cue. The law of nations is something like this. There is an ascent, a growth in progress, courage, honesty, and discipline, which the Greeks in their drama call the choros. Then there came what they called pride. A belief that they were the strongest and the best. And then comes the decline, ate, or disaster. Abraham Lincoln said, "I never fear that America will be conquered from without. But I do fear that it will be conquered from within." 19 out of 22 civilizations that have existed from the beginning of recorded history have decayed from within. Within. Not from without. When there begins to be a moral deterioration among the people, two things can happen. One, you get a dictator. You see, when everyone is working out his own will, you have, I got to be me, no concern for anyone else. So you get a tremendous amount of egotism and selfishness. And there's chaos. And along comes a dictator to organize that chaos. A certain kind of dictatorial socialism is the forcible organization of a chaos created by selfishness. And if that doesn't happen, what happens is an inner decay. Not the Huns and the Vandals coming from outside the nation, but from a passive barbarism that comes from within. Believe me, when we have any kind of decay in our national life, I always have to tell you what I draw, because I can't draw, as you already know. Now this is a mug of beer. Here's the foam. Now, when we get dishonesty in high places and a fear about our country, that is like the foam on the beer. And so we're apt to say, well, the whole responsibility is here. It's the foam that's guilty. Let me tell you, where does the foam come from? It comes from millions and millions of little bubbles down here. And we, the people, are the bubbles. And we produce the foam. So when we talk of blame, believe me, we have to look to ourselves. We, the citizens, have some responsibility too. Well, that's our fear, that we may decay from within. Our hopes, they are great. As John Gardner said, it's been about 200 years since our country was founded. Just go back and look how other countries were governed at the time of our foundation. France was governed by a king. Venice was a republic. China was governed by an emperor. Russia by an empress. There was a Holy Roman Emperor. England was governed by a strict monarchy. And all those forms of government have perished. And the only one that has endured, despite the fall of all the others, is the American nation, which was founded less than 200 years ago in the eastern part of the United States. That's something to be proud of. We have endured, and in the crises, we do band together. And another reason for our hope, too. We have been, in the history of our nation, fulfilling a triple role. And that triple role is this. We have been a sanctuary of peoples, for peoples. We began by receiving the persecuted people of Europe into our land. And see how we opened our arms to those who were persecuted by the Nazis. And to the people of Cuba. Believe me, America has a gold great ring alongside of the Statue of Liberty. And the persecuted peoples have touched that ring as they used to touch the ring on the outside of cathedrals in the great days of faith. They found a sanctuary. And then we've been a pantry. We have fed the poor of the world, one time giving $53 billion. I do not believe we're doing enough, and that'll be the subject of another telecast. But we have been a pantry. We've reached out our arms to the starving people. And finally, we have been a defender of the liberties of the world. Just think, we gave $57 billion in Lend-Lease. And we got back only 7. We gave Russia 376,000 trucks, 15 million pairs of boots, 75,000 jeeps. And while they were taking 243,000 square miles of territory from people with whom they had a non-aggression pact, we refused to take even 1 square foot of land. This to me is America. And that's why I have hopes for it. Why is it that we always have to look at the bad side of America? Why is it that the news has to be bad? I know it's not always possible to be good. To have good news. I know of a father who came home from work one day and said to his wife, I had a hard day at the office, just good news. And she said, well, you know, we have 5 children, 4 didn't break their legs. But there are 2 ways of looking at our country. We can look at our country as we look at a hospital. And one way of looking at a hospital is to say, look at it. Pain, grief, agony, shrieks, viruses, blood. Is that a hospital? Is that the whole truth? Hospital is also a place for care, love, and knowledge, and healing. And so it is with America. And believe me, one thing that we should be grateful for in this country is that we do not have to fear a knock at the door. A terrible knock at the door of totalitarian countries and the rest. It makes us say, what? Me? What for? I trust, therefore, we can revive a spirit of patriotism in this country. And we have to choose. We have to choose, I think, maybe between the vulture and the eagle. And the destiny of America in the next 50 years will be decided on this choice. Who are the vultures? The vultures are those giants of the air that hide in the mountain fastnesses. And just as soon as they see a cadaver and a rotting body, they swoop down from out those mountain tips and put their iron talons into the prey. And so when a nation begins to lose its decency and its morality, believe me, there are vultures outside. And they are ready to descend and devour the country. But we can choose the eagle. Moses used to see eagles build their nests, and they would build them always high in the mountains, always above a precipice. And the mother eagle would, when an eaglet was hatched, would push it over the nest and would begin to fall down the crevice. And to the little eagle eyes, it must have looked as if this were the end. And just before it would crash, the mother eagle would swoop onto it, carry it up into the sky, and repeat the process until it had learned to fly. And the symbol of our nation is not the lion, it's not the serpent. The symbol of our nation is the eagle, flying upwards and onwards beyond the hid battlements of eternity, up to God.